Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the Straight Out of Prison podcast. This is season 2, episode 9. My name is James K. Jones, and this is my story.
And this is Haley Jones, and this is his story that has now become a part of my story.
Guys, it's our story, so that means we got to deal with the things. So, right before we began to tape this episode, Haley likes to come in to the room where we do the podcast and bring her phone and all the distractions and the Apple Watch and all the things and the glass of water.
Like a normal human being would enter into any room that she's
Hold up. I don't have all those things
functioning.
Anyways, it's a huge distraction for me because anything we do on this table, we're taping this podcast on a table in our basement. And it's a nice soundproof room, but anything that happens in here like ends up on the podcast.
But now I've found a mat that I've put on the table, and you like, I'm putting down a glass right now, and you can't hear it at all.
Okay. Anyways, these are the things that will wind up on the For Real. That's our subscription podcast that we've added.
Yes, we'll unpack that more there.
Yeah, we can do that. So it's not 2021 now in this podcast. We're going back to 1998. And that's where we need to be.
All right. So last time, where did we end? We ended that you were going to some Christian dorm. Your best friends, what was their names again?
Chris and Glover.
Okay. And it was the Kairos ministry people that had come in and been
trying to have a Christian dorm.
Trying to get this Christian dorm, and they finally got it going, I guess. And your two friends were super excited and came to you, said they were going, and you said, I'm not going.
I'm not going.
And then
part of that.
You realized that they were going, and they were basically your only friends or your best friends. And so
they tricked me.
So you went because of them.
Only because of them. The only reason I went was because Chris said, I put your name on the list. And I said, you go ahead. I'm not doing all that. And he was like, well, me and Glover are going. And I was like, well, I guess I'm moving to the Christian dorm.
Yeah, because you had a real kindred with them. Like they were a real kind of light.
They're my only light in a very dark place.
In the dark place,
That was a very dark place. But it was more than that. Like, if I'd have met both of them, even now, like, we would have been, like, because we were very similar and we had the same background, makeup. We were opposites. Like, Glover was black, I was white. Chris was, like, he was like a gypsy.
So do you think that you would have been really good friends now? Is that what you're saying, or no?
Absolutely, because our common denominator was that we all were in love with Jesus and we're excited about his plan, and just, trying to sincerely seek after that and not seek after like religion or any kind of nonsense.
Okay, so you're going to this so-called Christian dorm.
Well, we ended up, and you said I didn't say this, but I did say it last time. They told us that we couldn't have a Christian dorm because if they established a Christian dorm at Donaldson, then the Muslims would want to have a Muslim dorm, then the Jehovah's Witnesses, and
I do remember that.
It would be never ending. Like, everybody would want their own dorm.
Right.
So they said, we'll let you do it, but you need to figure out a way to do it where it's not like labeled as a Christian dorm. Like, they put forth, like, call it a faith dorm, like any faith. But honestly, the administration at that time, we didn't know it then, but we learned it later. They were only letting us do it to shut the Kairos people up, like to prove to them there's no way that's going to work in a maximum security prison. It's great that y'all have these grand ideas, but it's not going to work. So they were basically using us to prove that it wouldn't work.
Okay.
But we didn't know that. And when we got there, I was excited to see that there were only 12 of us that said yes. There was me, Chris, and Glover. And then there was, I think there were like 4 or 5 or 6 chapel workers, and there was like 3 of them, Clover House, Huey Kuhn, and Terry Bush. Like, they were the ones that came with us, and there were 12 of us ended up. But we walked into a dorm of 96 men, and this was a dorm that was, it was a prison dorm. It was awful, like the stuff that went on at Donaldson. And the Kairos people came in. They were so excited. They came in, had a little meeting. They came in, encouraged us, and they bought us 96 plastic chairs. Like,
wait, why did they buy you 96 if there was only 12 of you?
There were 96 men in the dorm.
Oh, okay.
There were 12 of us that they planted in that dorm to start the honor dorm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they bought us 96 plastic chairs, which there were no chairs in Donaldson. Like, you sat on your bunk. And if you came out in the day room, there were like 6 tables, figure it out. They bought us the chairs. They bought us 2 TVs and a VCR so we could have classes, I guess. They said classes. And then I think it was the second or third day, they figured out this is too much for us. We're going to let them figure it out. So they got us the dorm, they got us the chairs, they got us the TVs, and they got us the VCRs.
So when you say they got us the dorm, there was 12 of you planted in a dorm with, 96 or whatever.
There were still 96 men that lived there.
Okay, but so the majority of them were not in this faith dorm.
No, they weren't studying that.
So what were they expecting? What was
Well,
what were you supposed to do?
They kind of left it up to us to figure it out. Like they came in, they had a little meeting. They told everybody in the dorm, we've decided we're going to establish an honor dorm. They called it the honor dorm.
Who called it the honor dorm first?
I'm not sure if it was the Kairos people or the administration that came up with that, but okay. Honor dorm meant that, you were gaining some honor because you were trying to do something different.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And because they couldn't label it with any kind of specific religion.
No, they couldn't.
Right. Okay.
And they could have, but it would have just caused problems. It would have been too much. That annoyed me because I was like, just let us be what we are. Like the only way you're going to find something different in prison is if you're following Jesus. And that was just my immature, like the way I saw it. Mm-hmm. But what ended up happening was we went in, we established it, and for the first maybe 6 to 8 weeks, it was a battle, and nobody wanted us to succeed. And it was about that time that we figured out, the administration, they didn't want us to succeed. They wanted to shut the Kairos people up because the Kairos people gave a lot of money to the prisons, and they did a lot of volunteering. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of them that would come in there, and they had basically built the chapel out there from the ground up. And, they did it. It was like anything in the real world, like your donors, your people that support you, they have influence.
Well, first tell me, you said they didn't want you to succeed. What does succeeding look like in this brand new thing? I mean, how did you know if it was succeeding or not succeeding?
It couldn't succeed because this was a violent prison.
No, but I'm saying define what success would be for this
for it to work.
Thing.
For it to work.
But it's still, I don't know for what to work.
For to go into a violent maximum security prison, the worst prison in the state of Alabama, and try to establish a dorm where people were not convicts or trying to do what they did and do something different, because it was the narrative, it was the culture. And Alabama was different from Florida, and they had a thing, they called them convicts. But they used that, if you said, I'm a convict, that meant it was like a badge of honor. Like, I'm a convict, I don't play games, I don't do this, I don't do that. And I didn't know what that meant because I didn't come up in the Alabama Department of Corrections. Most of the people, by the time they got to West Jefferson, they'd been in and out of prison 3 or 4 times. I'm fresh, I don't know any of that stuff. And it was like this, you got to stab somebody, you got to hurt somebody, you got to, make your way. And I just knew I couldn't do that anyways. We talked about in the last couple episodes, I'm not wired like that. I can't, kill people.
Okay, so basically the whole kind of purpose of this was for you guys, obviously, but also to kind of start a culture change for this whole prison. Was that the purpose of it?
It would end up, no, in the beginning, the purpose of it was to get the Kairos men to leave them alone about starting a Christian dorm. So they were going to let us do it so that we could fail, so that they could tell the Kairos men, see, we told you this wasn't going to work. But we didn't know any of that. All we knew was that we had this opportunity in front of us, and the opportunity was incredible. If we could do something different here in this hellhole, it was inspiring. Once I got hold of it, it took me a minute because I didn't want to be a part of it. But it was we've got this violent prison, this violent culture, this, where the prison rape and just all the stuff all the violence, all the stuff that happened there, is that we can set the tone to do something different. And it may not be going on all over the prison, but it's going to go on in this dorm, with this 96 people.
Right. Okay.
But the task ahead of us looked impossible. It's kind of like I would wake up one morning, like believing, like we can do this, like we can figure this out, we can put together a structure and a program, and then the next day I would wake up, after somebody got stabbed or somebody raped somebody, and be like, okay, this is never gonna work here. Like, why
Yeah,
am
that
I
would
here?
have felt like a fail for sure.
No, it was rough. Those initial, I would say the first, from January to like March or April, it was like if you went out into a field of weeds and you wanted to have a beautiful garden, like where do you start? You just have to get the weeds up, you have to like weed out everything, and you have to like start. And in the beginning, I didn't see it, but I was encouraged after we got in there because the group that we ended up with 12 of us was not like the Christian Brotherhood. It wasn't the religious people that was hollering at people, sending everybody to hell, all that stuff. We were trailblazers. We wanted something different. And it took me 2 or 3 weeks, but I realized I was right where I was supposed to be. And I was going to get to be a part of something that God was doing. And even though it was like I was like 50-50 in what I believed, this could actually happen. Like we could actually do something different here.
You mean 50-50 and believing like, oh, it could happen or it's never going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I would get, how I am. I get discouraged.
Yeah.
And when I get discouraged, I don't, just burn it to the ground. I don't care. But when I'm encouraged, I'm like, we can keep going. We can take the next step. We can do the next thing. And it was like that the first those formative times.
So it's almost like they were charging these 12 men to, okay, we want to see you guys make a difference. And I mean, I know I said this, and he's like, to start the change of a culture within this dorm,
yes,
within this prison.
It wasn't the administration. They didn't think.
I understand.
They didn't think it happened. It was the Kairos men.
Right.
They encouraged us, and they did come in. They were like, we will equip you, we'll support you, we'll do whatever. But then, like, we got like 6-8 weeks in, they were like, oh, this is a lot.
Okay, so you said they equipped you with the chairs and the TV.
Well, they got us the dorm. They got us the chairs, which we would need to have classes. They got us the TVs and the VCRs and stuff that we would need to have classes.
So did they do anything beyond that? Like what you were going to
No.
like, in the classes?
No.
Okay, so what happened next when they realized that this is too much?
So, I mean, it was never said that it was too much. It was just
Right.
like, it's like, well-meaning people come in and try to help and then realize, oh, no, like, what?
Right.
Like, there's a lot. But by the time that they never backed out, but they didn't really come in and put their feet on the ground and actually help us get it done. And by the time that they kind of backed out was when we stepped up and were like, this can happen. Like, we can do this. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. This is going to make a difference, and we can do it.
Which is obviously, to me, makes way more sense that y'all would be more effective and have like kind of having an instinct of how to move forward in the next step more than they would, because you were literally inside of it.
We're in there.
Yeah.
But there were 12. What's 12 minus 96? I don't know. What's that?
Oh gosh.
Don't figure it out. Anyways, there were 12 of us. There was 96 men in the
84.
dorm. So there were 12 of us that wanted to do something different. There were 84 people in the dorm that did not care about that. And so our task was to figure out how to make it work. So the only skills I had, the only thing I knew was to, I could do like Bible studies and stuff like that, like, because I become, good at that. But then we had like the chapel workers. They had a lot of influence, and then we just started one thing at a time. And the first thing we did was we called them community representatives. So we elected 6 community representatives, which meant out of these 96 men, we're trying to create a community and a culture. And these will be our leaders, and they'll be the ones that talk to the administration. And the administration was the chaplain and the captain. That was like the difference between kind of like America, separation of church and state. So, I mean, it was kind of ran like that because the chaplain had a lot of power, but then like the captain had a lot of power, and it was kind of divided power. So you had to navigate through the chaplain and the captain.
So did y'all come up with that? The community, like voting the community leaders?
Yeah, we didn't know what to do. That was the only thing we could think.
But that was y'all's idea.
Yes, and we wanted on purpose. We chose 3 of us to be the leaders, and we chose 3 people out of the other 84 that didn't want anything to do with it, because we realized, like, if we're going to make this work, it can't be just us. We can't come here and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put down. Because you don't do that in prison. Because if they feel like you're putting down on them, they ain't going to do it anyways. And then they're going to rebel against you. And it's going to be just like, so we had to like include what was there to make it work. So we elected 3 of us and then 3 of them. And
to be the community
representatives, we called
okay,
it.
yeah.
And that was where we started. We didn't know, we didn't know what we were doing. But it was like we knew that was like you had to start with some kind of like leadership structure. So we created a leadership structure. And immediately, I got offended because I didn't get elected. Because you know me, I feel like if we're gonna be running stuff up in here, like I at least need a voice.
We are so different in so many ways, but in this way, I think we're very similar.
No, but I got aggravated with that. But at the same time, I still have PTSD, like from dealing with what I dealt with,
right?
And also realized you don't even know this world. This is not your world. So don't even try to lead in this world. Like. Mm-hmm. Lead in a kitchen somewhere, so do something else. Don't try to lead here. So I kind of settled into that, but it was like every day, it was just work. We worked our tails off, and we came up with. We started with the community representatives. We realized that if we were going to like police ourselves, that we had to have standards. So we came up with 3 cardinal rules, which meant if you participate in any of these 3 things, you can't live in this dorm. And you got to move. You got to leave.
And y'all could decide that?
Yes, but it took a minute for them to be able to. We got back up from the captain. The cardinal rules were no sexual activity. So we decided if you're going to have any kind of sexual activity, it won't happen in this dorm. If you want to do that, go ahead and move out. The other cardinal rule was any kind of violence, like anything, like fights, theft, any of that stuff. And then, what was the other one? It was, drugs. Any kind of drugs, any kind of... In prison, it wasn't just drugs. There were drugs that came in.
But it's interesting to me that, like, y'all were given the power to decide, okay, if you do these things, then you can't be a part of this dorm. So they allowed you to kind of have that kind of, I guess, say?
We had to. You had to have a standard. So the standard for the honor dorm was no sex, no drugs, no violence. And if you want to do that, there were 17 other dorms that you could live in.
Okay.
And if you got kicked out for any of those violations, you could reapply later on. Like it turned into a really cool. It worked. Mm-hmm. It was it was a standard, and that was our standard. We had to have that standard.
It's crazy because I feel like these kind of things, like coming up with rules like that. That happens and is done in the free world, as you say.
Those were the 3 worst. Like things that would take people down. If you got involved with sex, you got involved with drugs, or you got involved with violence.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't just affect you, it would affect everybody.
Well,
maybe infect. But it would affect everybody. Mm-hmm. So if you had like violence or something like that going on in a dorm, they would lock the whole dorm down. So it affected 96 people. It didn't just affect you. So we were taking that stance was we're trying to create a community for people that want to do something different.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do something different, then you don't need to be here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So
immediately we set out, we created the leadership structure, then we created the cardinal rules, and then we started creating different departments. So everybody, if you lived in the honor dorm, you had to have a job in the honor dorm. And if you lived in the honor dorm, you had to be pursuing like some kind of practical, because we were not trying to do just like the Jesus, like come in and teach us about, the bread and the wine and, all the spiritual things, which are important. But we were trying to come at it from a standpoint of most of these dudes don't know how to read. They don't know how to get along with people. They don't know how to deal with their criminal thinking. And we wanted like we want to deal with everything.
Like a well-rounded individual, basically.
Yeah, and then practical things like how to write a check, how to have a bank account, how to get a job, how to go on a job interview.
Pause. When you say, just going back, because I want to understand all these facets, you said everyone was required to have a job?
Well, we created departments in the honor dorm.
So give me an example of a department and a job.
A department would have been like we had a coordinator. somebody was always at the coordinator's table. That meant somebody was always paying attention to what was going on in the dorm. So we were trying to set up classes. We were trying to set up just like an accountability, because we came up with rules. Like, if you want to smoke cigarettes, you have to do that in your cell. We didn't say they couldn't smoke cigarettes. You just can't smoke cigarettes out here where it's going to get on everybody else. And if we're going to have classes, if you're going to be disrespectful or, make noise or do any of that, you can't do that. Like, we came up with a list of rules. And I think the first time I got excited, like I really got excited, was some of the free world people started getting excited about what we were doing. And we had wish I remember who it was, but they gave us a library. They donated a library to us. So they came in and put up shelves and stocked it with books. And so that was a department. There was a library. There was coordinators. There were people walking around like the police.
But it's crazy to me what you're saying, like that they allowed you guys as inmates. I mean, I know you're in this honor dorm, like faith dorm, but they allowed you guys as inmates to create and implement all this structure.
Okay, well, since we do the for real, and we want to say what's really happening.
Yeah.
You want me to tell you what's really happening?
Sure.
The Alabama Department of Corrections has a problem with like personnel, and there's a lot of corruption, and also in a block like that, you would pay 3 or 4 officers to work that block 24 hours a day. They found out after our first 6 months, they figured out if they're really policing themselves, we just need to put one CO up there, and that CO will deal with the leaders, and then so it became like a financial thing.
Right.
And they were seeing, we were seeing something. They were seeing dollar signs.
Right. Which makes sense.
If we can make this work and we can only put one officer over there, then we can put the other officers in this, this violent, deal with this other stuff. So I think there was some financial stuff that was on that ended up making it work in our favor.
Right.
And then there ended up being some prestige in it, because once we got up and going, people just kept pouring into us. They donated a library. Then somebody came in and was like, hey, our organization teaches practical life skills, like life after prison, how to deal with conflict, and they were begging to get in there and help us.
How did they hear about it? I guess the Kairos people?
The Kairos people and then other volunteers. It ended up, and it was, I would always feel bad about that, but it ended up once we got up and going, the Kairos people didn't have a big part in it. I mean, they get the credit for starting it, but the Kairos people had their one thing was just to show love.
Right.
And to reach people and let them know that Jesus loves them and he has a plan for you.
But I kind of love that they kind of initiated.
I love it. No,
and
I do love it.
They kind of created the spark, and then you guys took it from there.
But then we got an outpouring of volunteers after that. I mean, like Gil Franks and Randy Walker, I talk about them. They were very foundational in my life.
Who you still are friends with today.
Absolutely. I mean, out of prison, they were begging, what can we do for you? How can we help you? How can we come alongside, help? Because their heart is really for the men that are in there. And there were so many people like that would come in. And you had your other people that want to do those long, boring Bible studies and stuff like that. And, that's good. But we were clear that we need, if we want to do just Bible study, we'll go to chapel service. We need Bible study, but we also need to learn how to be men. We need to learn how to handle finances. And we have the time. Why not do it now?
Isn't it true? I mean, what you're saying, it reminds me of just like anything else that I've heard in business world and even ministry world. When you start something and you get traction and you see some movement and you create community, people want to jump on board. It's like a snowball effect.
It is. And what ended up happening was when we went in, there were 12 of us that went in, and there was a guy, I can't remember his name. I probably wouldn't say his name because I have a negative about him, a negative viewpoint of him. But he was a captain's runner. His nickname was Shade.
That tells me all I need to know.
No, he was a good guy. He was a good guy.
His nickname was Shade.
I mean, his name, they called him Shade. And I asked him, like, how did you get that nickname? That sounds kind of sketchy. And he was like, you know how when you're out in the sun and it's hot, my mom said she wanted to keep her baby in the shade so he can stay cool. But he was a captain's runner. And
What's a captain's runner?
it meant he worked for Captain Carter, who
okay.
basically ran the prison under the warden.
Okay.
And he was over the honor. Captain Carter was over the honor dorm, and Chaplain Lindsay was over the honor dorm. So Chaplain Lindsay had his 4 people that lived in there, the chapel workers, and then Captain Carter had Shade. And
Had Shade.
I can't remember his name. His name
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
He was against us when we started, even though he was part of the hashtag Christian Brotherhood. He was against us when we started, but when he found out that this was working and it was starting to flip, then all of a sudden he wanted to be on board and be the captain's runner. And he announced himself as the pastor one time. It was bad. I mean, there's stuff like this that goes on in prison. I mean,
That goes on outside of prison too.
In the world, it's just people get all mixed up and messed up. But
part of it's a compliment.
maybe.
No, for sure. When you start, and people want to be a part of it, and especially when they start giving themselves titles, giving your own selves titles, you must be doing something good, right? Or something that's working on some level.
Well, here's the bottom line. That was hard work, what we did. But the bottom line was, I believe it was Doug Siegelman that got elected. I think it was Siegelman. I don't remember. I follow it now closer, the governors of Alabama. But we got a new governor in Alabama. It was Siegelman. And with every new governor, they appoint a new prison commissioner. Kind of like, when Trump became president, he appointed Jeff Sessions to be attorney general.
Okay, yeah.
But then when Biden got elected, he appointed Merrick Garland to be attorney general. So you pull in your own people.
Right.
So Siegelman was the new governor. I believe Siegelman was a Democrat, and there's not a lot of Democrats that win high office in Alabama.
Right.
But he did, and I think he was a good governor, even though there was a lot of stuff. I don't want to go down the political rabbit trail. But he appointed a new prison commissioner. This new prison commissioner was interested in what we were doing at Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. And he was so interested that, his first couple months being in that office, he decided he wanted to come see. And he came and he toured, and he was blown away. Blown away. Because by the time he came, it was the end of 98. It was after we had everything established. We had 96 men living in the honor dorm that wanted to be there, that were doing everything they could to stay there and make a difference. And he saw that, and he commanded, because he's the prison, he's
right.
He can say whatever he wants to.
He's in charge, yeah.
He said, I want one of these in every institution in the state of Alabama. So then they...
Do you remember his name?
No, I could look it up. I mean, I could fact check it and look it up. I have a newspaper article on that.
Okay. I was just curious. Anyway.
He was blown away. He couldn't believe it. This don't happen. Because, he'd been in all other prisons. What was happening right there, it was unnormal.
He recognized that it was different.
Yes, but then here's where it became a problem. He wanted that to go everywhere. So this was not a thing that came from the administration. The way we set it up, what we did, this was not a thing that came really from any free will people. We did, inmates created this program.
Yeah.
But we knew we're inmates. We can't get no credit, and we thought it was funny. But the mission statement for the honor dorm, I believe it's still to this day, and what they use, I wrote that. That's mine. Really? But I didn't call it a mission statement, I called it a vision. This is what we're doing. And they adopted it. And then the structure, the leadership structure and the all the rules and all that stuff was written by another inmate, Jason Coverhouse. And he worked for the chapel, but he was smart. One of his grandfather, great grandfather, founded the Coverhouse School of Law at the University. It's still there. He
At the
came
University of.
Alabama.
Okay.
Roll Tide, Holy Land.
Okay.
Nick Saban in the house. No, but I'm saying he was smart at like coming up with structures, and he didn't do it by himself. We all did it together. But like he authored it. It's kind of like Thomas Jefferson. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he didn't write it by himself.
Right.
Everybody had input.
I know because this is this is real time and it's a genuine conversation.
Yeah.
You don't have the vision statement or whatever that you're talking about that you wrote right now, do you?
I do. I have it somewhere. I need to look it up.
Well, maybe, I would love to hear that next episode or something.
Well, what the vision that I wrote, it was not called the Honor Dorm or Christian Dorm. It was called the Land of Goshen.
The what?
The Land of Goshen.
What does that mean?
It was it was like what I felt like God showed me, like what we had the opportunity to do here. It was from the Old Testament. It was, it's a Bible story. I don't want to get lost in the Bible story, but basically, well, we did talk about Joseph a couple episodes back. He went to Egypt. His brother sold him in slavery. He became like the prime minister, was running stuff in Egypt. Then there was a famine that hit the world. And then his brothers who sold him off into slavery came to Egypt to buy grain because they were starving. And they bowed down before Joseph. And Joseph, they didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And, long story short, he told them, I'm Joseph. You did this to me. Like, you sold me off into slavery. You tried to destroy me, but God used it for something good. And it was his plan to save the world through what you did to me. And the other side of that story was that Joseph called his father and all his 12 brothers and brought them over into Egypt. But because Egypt was the world power during that time, like that was where everything was happening. But because they were Hebrews were shepherds. Egyptians detested like they wouldn't even eat with them. They thought they were like nasty or whatever. The Pharaoh gave Joseph the best land in Egypt, the land of Goshen, and said, just let them live over there. We'll just keep them together. We don't want them eating with us and all that stuff. We love you, Joseph, but
it's a real good lesson, and it's just all about who you know.
No, it's good. It's a neat story.
Yeah.
But then the story was they moved in as 12 families, with one dad, 12 different brothers. Mm-hmm. And when they left there 500 years later, they were the nation of Israel. And it was over 2 million people.
Wow.
But while they were there, they lived in the best land. It was the best vegetation. It was fertile. They were in a place where they could thrive and grow and turn into everything that God created them to be in that land during that time. And I still see the Honor Dorm as that. It is a place where you can go. You don't have to worry about getting raped. You don't have to worry about people using violence against you, stealing from you, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can get in a place where we have resources, and the resources would grow, and we'll talk about this later. But help, anything.
So basically, you saw it as like a land of opportunity in prison.
Yeah, but they wouldn't use the land of Goshen because they said had Christian.
Right.
And
right.
I even argue, it was like, that's actually not Christian, that's Jewish. So, Christian would be, the Apostle Paul.
That's really neat, though. I love that.
Yeah. It was what I felt like God gave me. Like, this is what we're doing here. And this is what I've called you to be a part of. And if you'll do this, then I'll pop you out of here. And
I'll pop you out of here.
Well, I knew that was part of my process. I knew I wasn't trying to stay there.
Right.
I was trying to start something, but I felt like once I left there, I could come back. Mm-hmm. Once we got that going, 1998, 1999, I remember we even talked about like, man, if we keep doing like this and everything, because we were producing results in Donaldson. And then if you go from being at Donaldson Correctional Facility and then you go to every prison in the state of Alabama, that's results. And Jesus called that fruit.
So we never really got there, but you said the prison commissioner, that's his title, right?
Yeah.
Under the new governor commanded or just, said.
He established it. He said, I want
one of these. So that actually happened, I guess?
It did, but it was complicated because then they had to take our stuff. Like Chaplain Lindsay took credit because he was the chaplain, but he was like, I'm trying to speak nice to him. You got to remember my feelings towards him.
You've mentioned it before.
He was the chaplain when I was in lockup that would come around every week and talk to me, and he didn't care about me. Like, he didn't care what was happening with me or any of that. And even after that, he always, the day before I got out of prison, he told me, "You got a velvet tongue, Jones boy. Like, you got a velvet tongue. You think you can slick talk all these free world people?" And I'm like, dude, I don't care about all these free world people.
The irony of that is that I don't think you have a velvet tongue
I
at all.
don't. I'm not even good. I'm not even good with
Being
people.
your wife, I'm like, he did not know you very well.
No, he didn't. But he didn't try to. But what ended up happening was after the prison commissioner said that, then they were like, "What are we gonna do?" The mission statement was written by inmate James K. Jones. The structure and all the things that we use to keep it going was written by Jason Hunter Colehouse, who was a chapel worker who was in prison for murdering his mother, his father, and his brother.
Wow.
So I mean, it's crazy.
Hopefully, we're gonna unpack that story later.
Oh, absolutely. That needs to be a story in its own. But what ended up happening was we just took all of our stuff and we put it together on a Word document and had Chaplain Lindsay sign his name to it. And so he got all the credit as the chaplain. And he should have got a lot of credit because he let us do it. Like, he empowered us to do it. But it was more of a passive empowering. It wasn't like, "I'm going to get in here and help you." No, it was like, y'all just figure it out.
Okay,
don't
real
burn
talk.
the place down.
Does that bother you? Does that still like irk you a little bit?
No, I think it was the way it's supposed to be. No inmate's going to be able to create a program that's going to go to every prison in the state of Alabama. That's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not practical.
I mean, it just makes me wonder. I don't want to do too much of a rabbit trail, but like how many times this happens just in other situations. You just think, you see a name of who developed something. You're like, what really happened there? Like, how did that really come to be?
Well, I haven't really studied this out, but even like Thomas Edison, who created had all these inventions, and he created the light bulb and the film and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory. This happened. I haven't really studied it out, but apparently he had an African American that was his assistant that created the light bulb.
Wow.
But he got the credit because he's Thomas Edison.
Right.
And you work for me, now shut up and let me, do my thing. But we didn't see it like that. We saw it as an opportunity. We didn't care. Give the credit to Chaplain Lindsay, give the credit to Captain Carter, give the credit to Warden Mitchum. Oh, we got a new warden in that process too, who really wanted something different to happen at Donaldson. Like the warden that was there when I was there. I talked about this a few episodes back. He was evil. He was like, he wanted, just let it be carnage and
oh yeah, you did talk
sex, drugs, and rock.
You
and
saw
roll.
him at your restaurant several years later with cancer on his neck. Is
Well,
that the one?
he was one of my customers, and I never really acknowledged him. But he came in almost every day during the week and ate at Kairos, and he would call me out there. "I just want to tell you how proud I am," and I'm like, and I won't say his name, but I'm like, your name is a cancer to me just because of what happened to me. Under your leadership, like what happened to me, like the way you ran your prison, the way you let that stuff happen, and it is so ironic that you're sitting here eating my food and giving me your money. It's crazy, but I mean that's how God, works things out.
Yeah.
And I had several of those. I mean, one time I hired some carpet people to come when I bought my first house. I needed carpets cleaned, and somebody gave me a name, and I called, and I came and I looked. And there was a man cleaning my carpet, and it was a lieutenant from West Jefferson. And I was like...
From the prison?
Yeah, but lieutenants are high up. They're the ones that you... And I was like, my.
That is crazy.
And this was 2003, so I'd only been in prison for 4 years. And I was like, you know who I am?
That is so
You recognize
crazy.
me? And he said, no. And I said, good, but I know you do. But anyways, go ahead and clean that carpet up real good for you. Write you a check.
That is insane, truly.
It's crazy. But what happened during that time just solidified for me that I'm not in control. Like the process for me would have been to go to St. Clair and go to Bible college. But Jesus had a plan to send me to West Jefferson or Donaldson. And we started something that was much greater than Bible college.
So what was your biggest takeaway from, because you didn't even want to go in the beginning, and
no,
then you
I'm a lady doctor.
I mean, we've kind of covered all what happened in, I guess everything we've just talked about happened in a year's span. Is that right?
No, it was actually fast. It was we were pretty much up, running, and established by the summer. And we started in January.
So 6 months, more or less, 6 to 8
Yeah.
months. Okay, so that's pretty incredible. What was your
It's
biggest
crazy.
takeaway from just that process, I guess?
That you just need to keep doing the next thing. Whatever. You don't know what's going to lead to something that's going to be something absolutely amazing. And honestly, the honor dorm to this day, they're still in all the prisons. It's still a blessing. You know Mr. Gilbert, who worked for me at the Foundry?
Yeah.
You know how he changed his life
How?
after 32 years in prison?
How?
One of the chaplain's assistants pulled up on him and said, "We got some beds open up in the honor dorm. I think you're a candidate."
Wow.
Dave
Okay.
Booker, who's a friend of ours.
So, side note, Mr. Gilbert, that's what I call him. He worked with James at the Foundry, and he's actually one of my most inspiring. I'm just so
Yeah.
inspired.
We're gonna have him
for
on here.
someone to be in prison for 32 years, which is the most of my life, and to come out as an older man, and I mean, here's how I put it in perspective. When we were talking one day, to realize like, there was no cell phones. There was no, I mean, I feel like you put into like kind of a culture perspective on what was not happening when he went in prison, what was not there, and then what was there when he got out, and to adjust to all of that. I mean, and to do something different. And just a little side note, I mean, he really is an inspiration to me. Even just this week,
Yeah.
you were telling me how, he couldn't come to something that you had invited him to because he had started to coach
coaching
softball.
Yeah.
And he was just fired up. And I talked to him how excited he was. And that
Tell
was
his
the one
age, though. He's
thing.
almost 70 years old.
He's almost 70 years old.
Yeah.
And just to be at almost 70 years old and still discovering, like, okay, I'm starting a new thing and I am loving it. And I'm like full speed ahead and discovering new things that I love and that
But you know what
makes
the
him come alive.
difference maker for Mr. Gilbert is?
What?
At the age of 60, I think it was 66, 67, he began a relationship with Jesus, and that changed his life.
So at 66. Yeah, it's just...
It's beautiful.
He is, and he's kind of like the surrogate grandfather for our kids, because my dad's in heaven and all that. But
I'm not too
anyway,
connected to
he's
my
just
dad,
one of the most inspiring people that I think I've ever...
is.
I know personally.
He's a blessing. I love him. And he gives me way too much credit for his... Where's that? Wait, I feel like we'd lost our train of thought.
Sorry, I just...
We need to go
Mr.
back.
Gilbert and I got excited. Okay.
We need to roll back to
Okay,
98.
go back.
But actually, Mr. Gilbert is a product of the honor dorm. Like it
That's
was
crazy.
I never
That's
knew him when
cool.
I was in prison. We were there at the same time. We didn't know each other. We never connected.
Yeah,
But that was how he changed his life.
that's awesome.
And now he's part of our family.
Yeah.
He's not just a person, or he's a part of our family.
Yeah.
Like, that's neat. That's good stuff. But you asked like what irritated me. It's never irritated me about that Chaplain Lindsay had to have his name connected, or any of the administration, or they got the credit. We thought that was funny. We thought that was like a Jesus joke, like, haha, awesome. But we were still getting to do what we were doing, and we were gaining influence, and it was making a difference. But what does aggravate me now is, like, on the other side of success, people start taking credit. So there's a lot of free world, like, volunteers that try to take credit for that. And inmate started the honor dorm. And, all these people that try to do all these prison studies and, criminal justice stuff, if you would start with the people that were in there,
Yeah.
like, you would be able to figure it out. I saw like a History Channel thing. I don't know much about aviation, but apparently, like, after World War II, like, we were stuck in the same, like, military Air Force stuff, and they had like engineers and all these smart people that kept building all these things, and it was part of why that we couldn't like succeed in Vietnam and win, was because we didn't have superior air power. And there was a guy that was a pilot that designed the F whatever, somebody can call me on that. I don't know the letters, F1, 2, 17, 34.
Yeah.
But he designed that plane because he was a pilot and he knew what it took. And they didn't want it because it was not designed by the
Engineer, maybe.
the smart people, the engineers, all
Yeah.
things. But somebody took a gamble on him, and that's changed, changed everything.
Yeah.
And they still use his original prototype. But he wasn't some guy, some bureaucrat sitting in an office somewhere trying to come up with ideas. He was a fighter pilot. He knew what it took to make a difference, and he designed something that worked.
That's cool.
And it still works. I mean, everything they've got now came from his original thing.
Yeah.
But like this prison ministry, prison change, prison culture, prison whatever idea, if you would start with the people that were not on the outside looking in, but on the inside looking out, like we were, because we wanted something different. We wanted something different.
Right.
That was what was successful.
That's
And
kinda
I
neat.
think you can apply that to anything.
And to me, that speaks to the whole story of like, you're never too far. And if you've messed up and gotten yourself in a place, you know, like you in prison and all that, like there's a redemptive, there can be a redemptive factor to story too.
Absolutely.
You know, to that. Well, I mean, I love what you just said about like, whatever you said about the people looking from the outside in, but you're looking from the inside out.
And that's when we were able to make a difference.
Right.
But we got stuck. I think it was like 4 or 5 months in. We started gaining traction. Things were working. And we got stuck with the like the day-to-day, how to make it work kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was hard work, but we did it. But I learned a statistic that scared me. Like, I thought after I had an experience with Jesus, I'm good. Like, I don't need nothing else. I'm good.
Feeling good, like I should.
Like I should. But I learned a statistic, like somebody did like an outside like study. It was the people that went through these drug programs in Alabama, which were intensive. They're called SAP programs. And they're like, it wasn't like the joke that we had in Florida. Like, they really like challenged behaviors and all that stuff. Like, they were more, the recidivism means coming back to prison.
Right.
So if 10 people get out of prison, 7 of them are going to come back within a year.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before.
But the people that were going through this drug program and similar programs in other states had more success at not coming back to prison than anybody with church affiliation or any of that Jesus stuff. So that started, it was like eating at me, nagging at me, like, well, hey, something ain't right. Something ain't right. So we ended up leaning on them because they had been doing this drug program thing for years. Not at Donaldson, they just started it. But they knew things that we didn't know, like the practical, like how to get through and how to confront behaviors and do all the things. And so we reached out to them. I mean, this was a secular
program. When you say we, you mean you as inmates reach out to them?
Well, we had a lot of influence because we had Coverhouse, Huey Kuhn, and Terry Bush. They all worked for the chaplain.
These are inmates that worked for the chaplain.
Yes, but they were the ones doing all his work.
Okay.
So, I mean, all he had to do was walk around and snap his badge and do all the things that he did.
Right.
You know, and make the silly Baptist jokes that he made.
But if they made connection with him, then he could...
Well, no, they could influence him.
Okay.
It's kind of like you. Like, if somebody wants to get to me and they ain't getting to me, if they get to you, you can get to me. Does that make sense?
That's true, actually.
Actually, probably you're the only one that can really get to me or my kids.
Yeah.
But the chapel workers were a way to get to Chaplain Lindsay. So if we figured out something wasn't working, we need to do something different, we had our 3 aces in the hole. That was Coverhouse, Kuhn, and Bush. Like, they were the ones that could get to him and say, hey, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
And so he set it up. There was a very successful drug program going on at St. Clair. They sent us 2 inmates from there that came and worked with us and taught us, like, what they were doing.
That's cool.
Like, this is how, but it was, like, they did, like, stupid stuff that we would never do. Like, they shamed people, made them wear,
you say stupid stuff, but if it worked.
I mean, some of that stuff works in the moment, but I knew, like, you don't shame people into changing. You might shame people into changing for a minute, but then in prison, they might come back around and put a shank in the side of your neck. Like, you know, that ain't, like, they would do things like make people wear diapers, you know, because they're acting like, I end all that. We weren't into all that, but we wanted to look at the parts of that program that worked. And for us, what we learned was it was confronting behaviors and dealing with issues. but not confronting behaviors like that, but just being on, like, here, we need to do, like, whatever you're doing ain't working. We need to do something different. And we adopted that. They came in and worked with us for 3 or 4 months. It was Tony Nolan. I think he's still in prison.
You say these names like I know who they are.
Well, no, I feel like
yeah, it was Tony Nolan.
no, but I mean, they were so helpful. They taught us so many things. Like, y'all might be trying to start this program, but y'all don't know about convicts. You don't know how to make it work. And he did, because he'd been doing it for 10 years, however many times he did it.
Yeah.
And then there was another inmate. His name was Gerrel Jones. He came in.
That name sounds familiar.
You know Gerrel Jones. I worked with him at the Foundry.
Oh, yeah.
It's great. When I met him in 1998 when we were doing this, he was this little skinny black kid. He looked like Urkel. But he wore, like, in prison, if you had to wear glasses, they gave you glasses, but they didn't try to make them look good.
Yeah.
And he had, like, these thick glasses that were like, I mean.
I have the picture that, and I mean, now that you say it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know who he is. You worked with him. Well, and I have his picture in my mind, but not with the thick glasses looking like Urkel.
He don't look like that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, he came in, he helped us.
He's like a good-looking guy.
But he liked to cuss when he was teaching. Like, he'd get up there and be, like, cussing and go.
I mean, I can relate to that.
No, but I was like, why do you have to do all that? Like, why do you have to cuss? And he was like, they ain't hear me no other way. And I was like, well, you keep doing that. I mean, I feel like Jesus don't want me to be cussing people out. But he taught us so much. Like, he taught us, like, how to deal with, like, the root cause and, you know.
The root cause of
your, why you're here, why are you in prison?
Yeah.
Okay. It ain't because the white people put you in here.
Right.
And I couldn't say that because I'm a white people.
Yeah.
So
you're a white people. You also need to learn English.
just confront. I mean, that's prison lingo.
I know.
Like,
I'm just playing.
These crackers got me here.
Yeah.
But he taught us so much. But I guess going forward, I went to work for the Foundry in 2014. There was a guy named Gerrel Jones that went to work for the Foundry in 2015. We worked together for like 2 or 3 years. We worked together. He was a counselor, one of the most effective counselors we've ever had at the Foundry because he confronted behaviors. Like, he didn't let people do the...
I don't know if you said this. The Foundry is a...
I'm sorry. The Foundry is a ministry outside of Birmingham and Bessemer, Alabama. It's just helping people find freedom from addiction.
Like recovery and
reentry and people going to prison. But we worked together. I loved working with him. He was like, we were in the same, like... You know, let's deal with the issue. Let's don't sugarcoat all the things. And when Pastor Bill, who founded the Foundry, and he's one of my heroes, you know, I love Pastor Bill. I love his story, everything. He's helped so many people. When he was retiring in 2016, at a staff meeting, I felt like I was supposed to tell him what he meant to me. And I told him, you know, when I was in prison in Bessemer at West Jefferson, I used to hear you on the radio. And there was something about your voice that, you know, just gave me hope. And Gerrel was on the other side of the, you know, there was 100 people that worked.
And you'd been working together for 2+ years.
Yeah, I mean, not just working together. Like, we worked closely. Like, we had, like, I was running the food service, and I had people working with me that were he was their counselor.
Counseling, yeah.
And we were like, he was coming from the left, I was coming from the right. Like, we want to see this boy make it.
Right.
You know? And he texted me and said, I need you to call me quick. And then he was calling me, and I was like, what are you talking about? And then, like, I can't call you during a staff meeting. And he came up to me after that, and he said, I need to talk to you right now. And I said, is everything okay? Like, he called me outside, and he was like, you're James Jones. And I said, okay.
Hey, yes, I am.
And he was like, you're James Jones. You're James Jones from Donaldson Correctional Facility. You helped start the honor dorm. And so I said, yeah, okay. And he was like, do you remember that one hot summer when y'all were first starting the honor dorm and y'all needed help because y'all were struggling, you didn't know what to do, and you got some inmates that came from St. Clair to help? And I was like, yeah. And he said, do you remember a skinny black kid with thick glasses that looked like Urkel? And I was like, yeah, Gerrel Jones. And I was like, Gerrel Jones. It was great. Like we never, but he didn't have glasses. He didn't look like that anymore. And it's crazy, but he is.
That is insane.
But he's still doing that. He's still trying to help people, still trying to love people. He still cusses too a little bit. But But
we cuss a little bit, so let's not be judgy.
I'm not. I was judgy then, but now I'm like, me and Gerrel, we were in the same, we driving in the same car, heading to the same destination. Not that I'm like trying to cuss, but I mean, we can just be real.
Yeah.
We can do all that.
That's a really cool story, though.
It's beautiful. But there was just so many like pieces. It was just like God provided everything we needed to do everything He had for us to do, and it happened so fast. Mm-hmm. It was so fast. So there was a ministry called We Care Ministries out of South Alabama that were sending volunteers in, and they sent this one guy in. He came in, and there was something about him that I couldn't figure him out. My problem with this guy was he came in and he said I'm just here to help. And I was like, help what? And he was at ease with us. Like there was no uncomfort. There was no discomfort. Like he would go sit and just talk, and it was just like he was good. He was in his, element. And I couldn't figure out.
Are you saying like that you didn't feel like he had an agenda of any sort?
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
But it was like he was sincerely coming in to try to help us, but he didn't need nothing back. Like he didn't need credit. He didn't need, and I couldn't figure him out. Like I was like, who is that guy with the shiny shoes and the weird name? And they said, well, he's Mennonite. So I was like, what is Mennonite? I mean, I know about some of the, I don't know about what is Mennonite? Is that like the Midianites in the Old Testament? Like, no, it's a like, you have to look it up. They're kind of like Amish, but Amish light. They don't, they're not flashy and that stuff. And so.
Did you say Amish light?
That's what they call I'm not saying that's what it is.
No, I just never heard that. Amish light. It's
well,
like
if we're going to talk about denominations.
I mean, I've just heard Michelob light, Amish light.
Maybe it was like Bud Light. I don't know. It was like, they said Amish light. But it was, it's basically, like a sect of Christianity, and it comes from Europe, and it was during the time of the Reformation. They're called Anabaptists. And they didn't baptize their kids because they felt like...
When you say are you saying anti-Baptist?
It's not anti-Baptist. It's actually Baptists, like our Baptists in America, they're Anabaptists. A-N-A Baptist. Okay. Anabaptist. The term means that we don't baptize our babies. We dedicate our babies to Jesus,
okay.
but our babies need to... Like, people, when they come of age, they need to make a decision to follow Jesus because God don't have no grandkids.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So I feel like we're opening another can of
Let's
worms.
don't get stuck in that.
Yeah.
Anyways, they're very simple. They love Jesus. They're anti-war, anti-anything. A lot of Americans don't like Mennonites because they think you can't have war. And I'm like, if we didn't have a military, we wouldn't have a country. But anyways, I digress.
Yes.
I met him. He came in to help us. He said he came in to help us. I didn't know who he was. Like, who are you? And he had shiny shoes, which was weird, coming to prison with shiny shoes on. And he was so at ease and so confident, and was just like, I'm here to help. And my name is Steve Longenecker, and I want to help you. And I was like, help me what? I didn't trust him. But he would end up becoming like one of the, out of all the relationships I've ever had in my life, he was the man. Like, he wasn't my father. Like,
right.
But he was the man who would eventually help me to go from being a boy to being a man and grow up. In prison, out of prison, you know the story.
Yeah, but we're going to unpack that more.
Yeah, but we'll cover in the next episode. We haven't really talked about Chris. He was a big part, Chris Townsend, he was a big part of, starting the honor dorm.
Right, yeah.
He was going up for parole, all things.
Yeah, did he make it? I want to know. That was a cliffhanger from last week.
Well, it was a process. We'll talk about it next week. I had a big problem with Chris because he was charismatic. Like, he was like, I think if you did a personality thing, he'd probably be like an I.
I was going to say, he sounds like me.
Yeah, well, but it's different. It's different when you got two guys like.
Yeah.
And everybody loves Chris, and there's James. It's kind of like Judah and Royal, our sons, our twins. Like, Judah's like, hey, everyone's like, hey Judah.
Friends, what's up?
Yeah, and then there's Royal. Hey, Roy, how you doing?
Side-eyeing everybody. Yeah.
So that was kind of how we went, but good stuff coming. Let's just keep going. You good?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like we have several things like to cover next time, but it's good. It's exciting.
We do. Also, don't forget about what we're doing on the For Real. It's our subscription content. We're having an exciting time. We're talking about real stuff.
Just become a patron of the show, and you can get.
Yeah.
You'll hear about that on our website.
Absolutely, look it up. Become a patron. Come on, subscribe. You got your own special.
It'll be worth it. I promise.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Straight Outta Prison podcast. For more exclusive content, head over to our website, timjones.pro/podcast.
Yes, you can subscribe by clicking on the Become a Patron button, and that's going to get you access to our For Real, which is very different than the highlight reel. Some very juicy content there.
Good stuff. Or you can look us up on Facebook and Instagram, Straight Outta Prison podcast.
Yes, that takes the story to a whole new level where you can see some of the people that James talks about in his story and see some of the places that he's been. I've been loving it, and you will too.
Prison recipes.
Yeah, all the things.
Good stuff. We'll see you soon, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Getting anything out of these videos, please hit the like button, the subscribe. If you never want to miss a recipe or anything I do, hit the little bell and you'll get notifications.
Today, I made a chicken pot pie with my dad. I got vegetable.
Okay, you ready to put this top on this pot pie?
Yeah, and now I'm going to decorate it. Ooh, this pie is looking good. Why do you have a paintbrush?
It's actually not a paintbrush. It's called a pastry brush.
I'm painting now. And I'm not painting a picture. I'm painting food.
All right, time for the verdict.
Yep. It tastes amazing. Follow my dad's YouTube channel for more. Say, baby. Wait, no, I thought I never make dinner.
Well, we'll make dinner together soon, okay? All right, Lula made that for your dinner. What do you think?
It's good.
It's good.
Happy
right.
birthday.
Okay, it's not your birthday, but Judah James, look at Daddy. Lula made you dinner. What do you think about it?
H-I-A-B-C-D-E-F-G H-I-J-K.
So you just don't care?
Now I know my ABC. That time it's with me.